My son was standing in the hallway, holding his pillow like it was the only solid thing left in his world. He was 6 years old, and he was trying so hard not to cry that his whole body was shaking with the effort. His arms were wrapped around that pillow, the one with the faded dinosaurs on it, the one he'd had since he was 2, and his chin was trembling, and he would not look at me, because if he looked at me, he would lose the battle he was fighting. Mason's room is Tyler's room now, my mother-in-law said. She said it the way she'd say the sky was blue. A fact. Nothing to discuss. Behind her, through the open door, I could see Tyler's Spider-Man sheets already on Mason's bed. Mason's dinosaur wallpaper border had been half peeled off the wall, curling down like it too was trying to escape. I looked at my son, at his pillow, at the box someone had already started packing his Legos into, sitting in the hallway like his entire 6 years of life could fit inside a cardboard flap. Then I looked at Diane. "Get out of my house," I said quietly. Her smile flickered. "Emily, don't be dramatic. This is Robert's house too, and—" "Robert's been dead for 2 years, Diane." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "And this house has never been his. It's mine. It's been mine before I married your son. The deed has my name on it. Only my name." I watched the color drain out of her face in real time. That's the moment she realized she had made the biggest mistake of her life. I should back up, because none of this makes sense unless you understand what my life looked like before that hallway. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 35, a real estate broker in Scottsdale, Arizona, and a widow. My husband Robert died 2 years ago, a heart attack at 39, on a Tuesday, in the parking lot of his own accounting firm, gone before the paramedics even got there. Mason was 4. He barely remembers his father's voice anymore, and some nights that fact alone is enough to make me sit on my closet floor and cry where he can't see me. What most people didn't know, what I'd never had a reason to advertise, was that I bought our house myself 3 years before I even met Robert. I'd closed 3 commercial deals in a single year during the best stretch of my career, and I'd put every dollar of the commission into a 4-bedroom house in a good school district in Scottsdale, Arizona. When Robert and I got married, he moved into my house, not the other way around. His name was never added to the deed, not out of malice, just because we never got around to, and then he was gone, and it never became relevant. Diane Carter, my mother-in-law, never accepted that fact. In her mind, it was the Carter family home, because a Carter lived in it, and Carters didn't ask permission, they took. She'd moved in 8 months after Robert's funeral. I let her, because grief makes you generous in ways that later cost you, and because I kept telling myself Mason needed his grandmother nearby. What I got instead was a woman who rearranged my kitchen when I was at work, who told Mason his manners were soft because I let him cry when he was sad, and who never once, not once, said my name without a faint edge in it. And then there was Tyler, Diane's other grandson from her daughter Kristen, 9 years old, spoiled in the specific way that children become when nobody has ever told them no. Diane doted on him like he hung the moon. She bought him things she'd never buy Mason. She defended him when he broke Mason's toys. "Boys will be boys," she'd say, smoothing Tyler's hair while Mason sat there holding the pieces of whatever Tyler had just destroyed. I'd let it slide for 2 years because I was tired, because grief had hollowed me out, because I kept thinking, he's her grandson too. Be patient. This is what family looks like sometimes. I was wrong. And it took watching my son hold his own pillow in a hallway to understand exactly how wrong. It started, really started, on a Sunday in April when Kristen and her husband announced they were between houses and needed somewhere to stay for a few months. A few months. I know now that phrase should have terrified me the second I heard it. Diane didn't ask me. She told me over dinner, like she was informing me of a weather forecast. Kristen's family will move into the guest room, and Tyler will take Mason's room since it's bigger. Mason can bunk with me for a while. I remember setting my fork down very carefully. Mason's room isn't up for negotiation, Diane. "It's the biggest room besides yours," she said. "Tyler's growing. He needs the space for his desk, his gaming setup." "He's 9. He doesn't need a gaming setup more than my son needs his own bed." She smiled the smile she used when she'd already decided something and was simply waiting for me to catch up. "We'll talk about it." We did not talk about it. 3 weeks later, while I was showing a $6 million property in Paradise Valley, the kind of closing that doesn't reschedule itself for family drama, Diane moved Mason's things into her room and moved Tyler into his. I found, when I walked in the door at 6:15, and found my son in the hallway with his pillow. I want you to understand something about me before I tell you what happened next. I am not a woman who screams. I didn't grow up in a house where screaming solved anything. It just taught you to flinch. I built my entire career on the opposite instinct, staying calm when a deal was falling apart, staying calm when a buyer's financing collapsed 48 hours before closing, staying calm when everyone around me was panicking, because the person in the room who doesn't panic is the person who ends up in control. So when I looked at Diane in that hallway and told her to get out of my house, I wasn't yelling. I was simply, finally, done. "You can't just kick me out," she said, recovering her composure fast. Diane always recovered fast. It was one of her more dangerous qualities. "This is a family home. Robert would never have wanted—" "Don't," I said. "Don't you dare use him right now. I'm his mother, and I'm his wife. Was his wife. And I own this house, Diane. I bought it in 2018 before I ever met Robert. It has never had his name on it, and it certainly has never had yours." I crouched down and picked up Mason's pillow box. Gently, the way you'd handle something breakable. "You moved my 6-year-old son out of his bedroom without asking me. You gave his room to a child who isn't even yours, and you did it while I was at work, earning the money that pays every bill in this house, including the roof over your head for the last 8 months. Diane's mouth opened and closed. Kristen appeared in the hallway behind her, drawn by the tension the way people always are. Tyler trailing behind her holding a tablet, oblivious. "Emily, honey, we didn't mean to upset Mason, it's just—" "He's standing right here," I said. "Ask him if he's upset." Nobody did. That silence told me everything I needed to know about how this family operated. That night, after I'd moved Mason's bed back into his room myself, Diane didn't lift a finger to help, just stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, muttering about ungrateful daughters-in-law. I sat on the edge of his bed while he finally let himself cry into my shoulder. "Is Grandma mad at me?" he asked. "No, baby. She's not mad at you. This isn't your fault. It was never your fault. Tyler said it was his room now, forever." I held him tighter and didn't say anything for a moment because I needed to make sure my voice would come out steady. It was never going to be forever. I promise you that. What I didn't tell him, what I could barely admit to myself, was that this wasn't really about a bedroom. It was about 2 years of small erosions I'd let happen because I was too exhausted by grief to fight them one at a time. Diane hadn't taken Mason's room in a single afternoon. She'd been taking pieces of my authority in my own house for 2 years, and I'd let her, because every individual piece felt too small to be worth a war. The pillow in the hallway was just the piece I couldn't let go of. The next morning, I called my sister-in-law's husband, not Diane's family, my late husband's cousin on the other side, a man named James Whitfield, who happened to be a family law attorney in Phoenix. James had always liked me, had come to Robert's funeral with red eyes he didn't bother hiding, and had told me more than once, half joking, "If that woman ever gives you trouble, call me first." I called him first. "She did what?" His voice sharpened immediately. "Moved into a house that isn't hers, reassigned my son's bedroom to another child without my consent, and I have reason to believe she's told people, mutual friends, her church group, that the house is the Carter family home, and that I'm, in her words, just living there. You own that house outright? Since 2018, deeds in my name only. Robert's name was never added." There was a pause, and I could hear him actually smile through the phone. "Then legally, Diane Carter has no more right to that house than a stranger off the street. You could have had her removed the first week she overstepped. Why didn't you? Because she's Mason's grandmother. Because I was grieving and I didn't want my son to lose more family than he already had. That's a good reason, gently. It's just not a reason that protects you forever. Do you want me to draft a formal notice? I thought about the pillow, about the box of Legos in the hallway, about Tyler's Spider-Man sheets already tucked onto my son's mattress before I'd even walked through the door. Yes, I said. Draft it. I should have known Diane wouldn't go quietly. Women like Diane never do. They lose a battle and immediately start planning the next one, usually before you've even finished celebrating the first. 2 days after the hallway confrontation, I came home to find Kristen's minivan gone, but Diane still very much present, sitting at my kitchen table with a stack of papers in front of her like she was preparing for war. "I spoke to a lawyer," she announced, before I'd even set my bag down. Good. So did I. That threw her just slightly. A flicker behind the eyes, gone almost as fast as it appeared. Robert wanted this to be a family home. I have text messages, emails. He talked about renovating for a bigger family someday, adding rooms for grandchildren. Wanting to renovate a house he didn't own isn't the same as owning it, Diane. You're twisting this to punish me. I'm not punishing you. I'm asking you to leave the house that belongs to me and my son. That's not punishment. That's just the truth you've been ignoring for 2 years. She stood up so fast her chair scraped against the tile. I raised that boy's father. I have every right to be part of his life. You do. And I meant it. This was the part that made all of this so exhausting, that I didn't actually want to erase her from Mason's life. I just wanted her to stop treating my home like conquered territory. You have the right to be his grandmother. You do not have the right to give his bedroom away to another child while I'm at work. Those are 2 different things, and you have never once been able to tell them apart. What Diane didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone yet, not even James, was that I'd started documenting everything 3 weeks before the bedroom incident. Not out of paranoia, but out of instinct, the same instinct that had made me successful in real estate. When something feels off, you start building a paper trail before you need it, not after. I had photos of the wallpaper Diane had stripped from Mason's walls without asking. I had a text from Kristen sent 2 months earlier saying, "Mom says we can basically move in whenever, the house is practically ours anyway, LOL." A text I'd screenshotted the moment I read it, some part of me already sensing where this was heading. I had bank statements showing I'd covered every mortgage payment, every utility bill, every dollar of property tax since Robert died, while Diane contributed nothing beyond the groceries she bought for herself. I had, in other words, a case. What I didn't have yet was the moment that would make Diane's downfall public instead of private. The moment that would matter. The moment that would finally teach Diane that this wasn't a battle she could win by simply outlasting me. That moment arrived on a Thursday, in the form of a phone call I never expected. "Emily Carter?" The voice on the other end was crisp, formal, unmistakably military in cadence, even through a phone speaker. "Speaking?" "Ma'am, this is Colonel Marcus Reyes. I believe you knew my brother, Robert." I went very still. Robert had mentioned a brother exactly twice in the 6 years I'd known him, a half-brother from his father's first marriage, estranged long before I ever entered the picture, someone who joined the army at 18 and essentially vanished from family gatherings for 2 decades. I honestly assumed he was a story more than a real person, the way certain relatives become myths in families that don't like to talk about their fractures. "Robert mentioned you," I said carefully. "I didn't know how to reach you after he passed. I'm sorry, I should have tried harder." "You had no way of finding me, ma'am. I was deployed. I only recently learned my brother had died and that he'd had a son." A pause, and something in his voice shifted, softened. "I'd like to meet my nephew, and ma'am, I need to tell you something about our father's estate that I don't think Diane ever told either of us." Every hair on my arm stood up. "I'm listening," I said. "My father, Robert's and my father, Harold Carter, set up a trust before he died, back in 2015. Diane was executor. That trust was meant to be split between Robert and myself in equal parts, once we both turned 40 or upon certain conditions being met. I never saw a dime of it. I assumed, given our estrangement, that I'd simply been cut out. But I recently obtained documentation through my own attorney, frankly, prompted by some very overdue reconciliation with this family, showing that Diane never disclosed the trust's existence to Robert at all. She's been drawing from it for years. I sat down slowly at my kitchen table, the same table where Diane had spread out her stack of papers 2 days earlier. How much money are we talking about? Just under $400,000, ma'am, most of it gone, and a good portion of what remains was used, according to the withdrawal records, for, quote, listed as household contributions over the last 8 months. 8 months, exactly as long as she'd been living in my house. She's been living off money that was supposed to be Robert's, money that should have gone to his son. Yes, ma'am, and I intend to make sure that's corrected, properly, legally. I'd like to be there when it is, if you'll allow me. I thought of the pillow in the hallway. I thought of Mason asking if his room was gone forever. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt something other than grief or exhaustion. I felt the ground shifting under Diane, and she didn't even know it yet. Colonel Marcus Reyes, I learned over the following days that he'd taken his mother's maiden name decades ago, another small fracture in a family full of them, was not a man who did anything halfway. Within a week, he'd retained a forensic accountant to trace every withdrawal from Harold Carter's trust over the past 6 years. Within 2 weeks, he had a folder thick enough to require a rubber band, sitting on my kitchen table next to James Whitfield's own folder of documentation about the house. She used trust distributions to pay for a cruise in 2021, a down payment for Kristen's car in 2022, and starting 11 months ago, roughly $4,200 a month categorized simply as household. That's almost exactly when she moved in with me, I said. She's been billing herself room and board out of a trust that was never legally hers to control that way, James said, scanning the documents with the focused calm of a man who'd been waiting years for a case this clean. Combined with the fact she has no ownership claim to your home whatsoever, and the fact that she unilaterally displaced a minor child from his bedroom without the homeowner's consent, Emily, I want to be honest with you. This isn't just a family dispute anymore. This is fraud, and it's eviction, and if you want to pursue both, you have grounds for it. All of it. I looked at Marcus. In the 2 weeks I'd known him, he'd shown up to every one of Mason's after-school pickups he could manage, sat cross-legged in the living room floor building Legos with a boy who'd never met his father's brother before, and never once raised his voice, even when discussing $400,000 of stolen money. There was something in the steadiness of him that reminded me, painfully and wonderfully, of the version of Robert that I'd fallen in love with before grief and exhaustion had worn everyone down. "What do you want to do?" I asked him. "I want the truth in a room she can't spin," Marcus said. "Privately, she'll deny, deflect, negotiate. She's had years of practice controlling the narrative in this family. I want witnesses. I want it undeniable." "Family dinner," I said slowly, an idea forming. "Sunday. Kristen's there. Tyler's there. She'll think it's a peace offering." Marcus's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. "Then that's when we do it." I want to tell you that I felt triumphant in the days leading up to that Sunday. I didn't. I felt sick, mostly. The particular nausea of a person about to detonate something that can't be undetonated. Diane was a difficult woman, but she was still Mason's grandmother, and some fractured, hopeful part of me kept whispering that maybe, faced with undeniable proof, she'd simply apologize. Maybe this wouldn't have to be a war. That hope lasted exactly as long as it took Diane to sit down at my table on Sunday evening, look at Marcus, a man she clearly hadn't expected and clearly didn't know what to make of, and say, brightly, "Well, isn't this a nice surprise? Robert's brother finally gracing us with a visit." half-brother, Marcus said evenly, though I understand you've been drawing on money that was meant for both of us for quite some time. The room went silent. Kristen's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Tyler, blessedly oblivious as always, kept eating. Diane, want to know what you mean, Diane said, and her voice had the particular brightness of a woman buying herself time. I mean Harold's trust, Marcus said. $400,000 meant to be split between Robert and me at 40. I have the withdrawal records, Diane. I have 6 years of them. I know about the cruise, I know about Kristen's car, and I know about the $4,200 a month you've been taking out for the last 11 months, labeled household, while you were living, uninvited, in a house you don't own that Emily paid for, while telling everyone who'd listen that it was the family home. Diane's face had gone the color of old paper. That money was... Harold wanted me to have discretion. He trusted me to manage it. He trusted you to manage it for his sons, not to spend it on yourself and call it stewardship. I have a forensic accountant's report. I have bank statements. And frankly, Diane, I have very little patience left because 2 weeks ago, I met a 6-year-old who told me his grandmother gave his bedroom to his cousin while his mother was at work, earning the money that was paying for the roof over both of their heads. Kristen set her fork down. Mom, is that true about the trust? It's complicated. It's not complicated, I said quietly. It was the first thing I'd said since sitting down, and every head at the table turned toward me. It's actually very simple, Diane. This house belongs to me. It has since before I met your son. You moved in because I let you, out of grief and out of love for Mason. You repaid that by taking money that wasn't yours and giving my son's bedroom away to a child who isn't yours either. That's not complicated. That's just what happened. Emily, please, we're family. We were family when you respected me. You never did. Not once in 6 years did you treat me like anything other than an obstacle between you and your son, and then an obstacle between you and your grandson. I stayed quiet about it because I thought that's what keeping the peace looked like. I was wrong. Keeping the peace isn't the same as letting someone walk over your child. Diane looked around the table, at Kristen, whose face had hardened into something unreadable, at Marcus, whose calm was somehow more devastating than any raised voice could have been, at Tyler, who had finally looked up from his plate and was watching his grandmother with the wide, uncertain eyes of a child realizing the adults in the room were not, in fact, in control. I want to negotiate, Diane said, her voice cracking slightly. I'll pay back what I can. I'll move out, but I need time. You have 30 days, James said, speaking for the first time, sliding a folder across the table toward her. That's the notice period Arizona law requires even for an occupant with no lease. As for the trust, Colonel Reyes and I will be filing jointly to recover the funds. You can cooperate, or you can make it a much longer and much more public process. Given that a portion of the trust was designated for Mason's education upon Robert's death, I'd also advise you that withholding disclosure of a minor's inheritance is the kind of detail that tends to interest judges quite a bit. Diane's hands were shaking now. All the confidence that had carried her through 2 years of small conquests, the wallpaper, the bedroom, the quiet insistence that this was her family's house, had finally run out of road. I was trying to help this family, she said, and for the first time, her voice sounded genuinely broken rather than performed. I don't know when that stopped being true. Nobody answered her. Sometimes silence is the only honest response left. She moved out 19 days later, not 30. Kristen, to her credit, pushed her mother to go faster once the shame of the dinner had settled into something closer to reflection. Marcus's legal team recovered just over $300,000 of the original trust, a portion of which, per Harold's original intent, was placed directly into an education fund for Mason, protected this time by a structure Diane could never touch again. Kristen and I didn't become close, exactly, but something shifted between us. She started calling before bringing Tyler over instead of assuming she was welcome. She apologized once, quietly, in my driveway, for not saying anything the night her son moved into my son's bedroom. She said, "I told myself it wasn't my place. I think I just didn't want to be the one to say no to her." "I understand that better than you'd think," I told her. And I did. Diane, for her part, did not disappear from Mason's life entirely. I made sure of that, because whatever else she was still his grandmother, and I refused to let her cruelty rewrite him into someone who thought love had to be earned through obedience. But the visits were on my terms now, in my house, with my permission. Small, supervised steps toward a relationship that would have to be rebuilt from something closer to zero. Marcus stayed. Not immediately, not dramatically. There was no sweeping romance in the months that followed, just a slow, steady presence. He came to Mason's kindergarten graduation in May, sat in the third row with his uniform jacket over his arm, and cried harder than I did when Mason's name was called. He taught my son to ride a bike in July, running alongside him down our quiet street, both of them laughing so hard neither of them noticed when Mason finally stopped needing to be held up. 6 months after that Sunday dinner, I stood in the doorway of Mason's bedroom and watched him sleeping under his dinosaur wallpaper, reprinted, reordered, restored exactly as it had been before anyone tried to take it from him. His pillow, the one with the faded dinosaurs, was tucked under his arm the way it always was. I thought about the version of myself who'd stood in that hallway 6 months earlier, quietly helping her son pack a box that should never have needed packing. I wasn't her anymore. I hadn't won by shouting or by revenge or by luck. I'd won because I'd stopped mistaking silence for peace, and because when the moment finally came, I had the truth, the documents, and the people who mattered standing beside me instead of against me. I turned off the hallway light and pulled Mason's door partway closed, the way he liked it, not shut, just enough to keep the dark outside where it belonged. This was his room. It always had been. And for the first time in 2 years, nobody was ever going to tell him otherwise.